I thought she forgot me after graduation, until the day she whispered, "I'll mark you present," in my room. The classroom looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the sunlight, softer now, slipping through the old blinds, catching the chalk dust that still floated in lazy spirals above the desks. Or maybe it was me. People change when they leave a place behind, and returning always makes you realize just how much you've grown, and how much you've missed. I wasn't supposed to stay. I come back to the school just to help set up for an alumni event. Stack chairs, hang a banner, small things. But when I passed by her door, something in me hesitated. The name still printed on the little gold plaque. Ms. Rowan, English Literature. That name alone brought back the sound of her voice. Calm, steady, patient. The kind of voice that could quiet a whole room without ever needing to raise it. She was still there, at her desk, bent over a stack of papers, her glasses slipping toward the tip of her nose, a faint line of concentration on her brow. The years hadn't changed her, not really. Her hair was a little shorter, a little darker at the roots, but she carried the same quiet grace that used to make the room feel like a safer place than the world outside. I almost turned away before she looked up, but then her eyes caught mine. For a second, it was like being 17 again, standing in that same spot with late homework in my hands and excuses on my tongue. Her mouth curved into a small, knowing smile. "You're still terrible at leaving on time," she said. The same teasing lilt in her voice that always softened the edges of her discipline. I laughed before I could stop myself. "And you're still grading when you should be home." She leaned back in her chair, the faintest sigh slipping out. Some habits are hard to break. The way she said it made me wonder if she meant more than just paperwork. There was silence then. Not awkward, but heavy with something unspoken. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the creak of the wooden floor, even the rain tapping faintly at the windows seemed to hold its breath. She gestured toward the old bookshelf by the window, the one that used to lean slightly to the left. "You remember those journals? I still keep them." I couldn't bring myself to throw any away. I stepped closer, tracing a fingertip over the worn spines. My name was probably still on one of them somewhere. Back then, she was the first person who ever made me believe my words mattered, like what I wrote could mean something beyond a grade. And standing there again, with her voice so close and her presence filling the space between us, I realized something simple, but dangerous. Sometimes, the past doesn't stay buried in memory. Sometimes it waits, patient, quiet, until you walk through the same door again. She smiled once more, softer this time. "Well," she said, eyes glinting, "since you're already here, you might as well help me finish." And somehow I knew I wouldn't be leaving anytime soon. The staff room hadn't changed much. Same dull beige walls, same humming fridge, same table covered in half-empty mugs and old staff bulletins pinned crookedly to a corkboard. But when she stepped inside, it somehow felt warmer, more alive, like the space adjusted to her presence. "Still take yours black?" she asked, pulling open a cabinet filled with mismatched cups. I smiled. "You remember that?" She gave a small laugh, low and unhurried. "Writers never hide their coffee habits. You used to come in here every morning pretending to be invisible while you waited for the bell." The kettle clicked. Steam rose in soft ribbons. The smell of roasted beans and chalk dust mixed in the air. Strangely comforting, like two worlds colliding. The boy I used to be, and the man standing here now. She handed me a mug, the ceramic warm against my palms. Her fingers brushed mine for the briefest second. Not intentional, maybe, but enough to make my pulse skip. She didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did, and that was why she turned away to stir her own cup, giving me a moment to steady myself. We sat across from each other, the old table between us, a lazy sunbeam stretching across its surface. She crossed her legs, her skirt brushing softly against the chair leg, and leaned back with the kind of ease that only came from years of self-assured poise. "So," she said, watching the steam rise, "what brings you back here, really?" I hesitated, then shrugged. "Nostalgia, I guess. Maybe unfinished business." Her eyebrow lifted. "Unfinished?" I smiled faintly. "I never thanked you for making me believe I could write something worth reading. For a moment, she didn't answer. Just looked at me, really looked. There was pride in her eyes and something else too. Something softer, maybe even fragile. "You did the work," she said quietly. "I just gave you a place to start." Silence lingered again, but this one felt different. Not heavy, just full. The kind of silence that says everything words can't. I found myself noticing little things. The way her thumb traced the rim of her cup. The way her hair caught the light when she tilted her head. She laughed suddenly, breaking the spell. "You still stare when you're thinking. You used to do that in class." Made me wonder if you were memorizing my face or the lesson. I grinned, trying to sound casual. "Maybe both." She held my gaze longer than she should have. Long enough for the air to feel charged. The hum of the old ceiling fan the only sound between us. Her smile softened then, and she stood, reaching for the sugar. Our hands met halfway, both fingers brushing the same packet. Neither of us moved first. It was nothing, a passing, harmless moment. Yet it carried a quiet electricity that neither of us acknowledged aloud. She finally stepped back, exhaling gently. "Careful," she said with a small smile. "You'll make the teachers gossip." I laughed, but my voice sounded different to my own ears. Lower, unsteady, caught between memory and something new. And in that still, golden room, I realized how dangerously easy it was to fall back into her orbit. One look, one smile, and the years between us dissolved like sugar in coffee. After coffee, she led me back to her classroom. The halls were quiet now, only the echo of our footsteps and the faint hum of the overhead lights. It felt strange walking behind her again, just like I used to, except this time the distance between us wasn't measured in years, but in heartbeats. When we stepped inside, she went straight to the shelf by the window, the same one she'd mentioned earlier. It was old, the wood darkened by time and sunlight, lined with journals whose spines had faded to shades of brown and blue. She ran her fingers over them slowly, as if greeting old friends. "These," she said, her voice low and fond, "are 20 years of stories, some clumsy, some brilliant, all honest." She turned slightly, offering a small, nostalgic smile. "You wrote in the red one." I walked closer, drawn in by the sound of her voice, by the way she said you wrote. There was something almost reverent in her tone. She pulled the red journal from the shelf and dusted off the cover. My name was still faintly visible on the corner of the first page, a younger version of my handwriting, eager and uneven. I flipped it open and scanned a paragraph I'd written years ago. It was raw and idealistic, about chasing freedom, about wanting to be understood. She leaned over to look too, her shoulder brushing lightly against mine. The scent of her perfume, soft and floral, drifted between us. "You always wrote about freedom," she murmured, her eyes on the page. "And I always wondered if you found it." Her words lingered in the air. I didn't answer right away. Partly because I didn't know, partly because her closeness made it hard to think. I think," I said finally, "I was just trying to write my way out of feeling lost." Her gaze shifted to me then, quiet, empathetic, searching. There was no pity in it, only understanding. "We all do that," she said softly. "Some of us just hide it behind red pens and lesson plans." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. For the first time, I saw the fatigue behind her calm. Not physical, but emotional. The kind that builds slowly when you spend years taking care of everyone but yourself. Something in me wanted to reach out, to offer comfort, to let her know she didn't have to hold that poise all the time. But I didn't. I just stood there, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her, far enough to keep the boundary intact. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight spilled across the desk, catching the dust in golden swirls. She turned another page, and her thumb paused over a line I'd written. "Some people feel like home, even when you're not supposed to stay." When she looked up, there was something unspoken in her expression. A mix of surprise and realization. For a heartbeat, neither of us moved. Then she closed the journal carefully, pressing her palm flat against the cover as if to steady her own heartbeat. "Some memories," she said almost to herself, "don't really age." They just wait to be found again. Her eyes lifted to mine. Soft, uncertain, and full of something that felt a lot like permission. And in that quiet, sunlit room, I realized we weren't just talking about a book anymore. By the time the last of the rain clouds cleared, the hallways were nearly dark. The event volunteers had gone home hours ago, leaving only the faint buzz of old ceiling lights and the rhythmic drip of water from a leaky pipe near the window. The school had turned quiet, the kind of quiet that amplifies every thought you don't want to hear. She stood by her desk, sorting papers that didn't really need sorting, her movements slower now, thoughtful. I leaned against the doorway, not wanting to leave, not sure if I should stay. "You've always had this habit," she said without looking up. "What habit?" "Lingering, like there's something left unsaid." Her words made me smile, not because they were teasing, but because she was right. There was always something about her that kept me suspended between wanting to speak and being afraid to. She finally turned toward me, arms crossed loosely, her expression softer than I'd ever seen it. "It's late," she said, but her tone didn't sound like goodbye. I took a small step closer, the floor creaking beneath my shoes. "Do you still live near here?" She hesitated before answering. "A few blocks away." Then quieter. "The apartment feels emptier than it used to." Her words hung in the air, delicate and brave. There was a loneliness in them that caught me off guard, the kind you don't usually admit out loud. She gathered her bag, turned off the desk lamp, and moved toward the door. The light from the hallway cast her in soft shadow, outlining her silhouette, calm, graceful, familiar. Then, just as she reached the doorway, she stopped. Her hand rested lightly on the frame, and for a moment she didn't look at me. When she finally spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. "I'll mark you present." She paused, her lips curving into the faintest smile. "In my room." The words landed gently, but they carried a weight that made the whole world pause. I blinked, uncertain if I'd heard her right, or if my mind had turned her voice into something it wanted to hear. She looked back then, and her eyes met mine. Steady, knowing, but with a flicker of uncertainty, as if she was daring herself to say it. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, my breath caught somewhere between disbelief and understanding. Then she tilted her head slightly, as if offering an escape from her own boldness. "It's just down the street," she added quickly. "You can help me carry these papers home." The tension broke into a quiet laugh, hers first, then mine. But beneath it was something undeniable, an undercurrent neither of us could pretend away anymore. As we walked down the hall together, the sound of our steps echoed in rhythm. The night outside smelled of wet pavement and distant lilacs from the school garden. Neither of us spoke again. We didn't need to. Every unspoken thing had already found its place in that whisper. And though she called it an invitation for help, we both knew it was something else entirely. Something careful, uncertain, and far too late to stop. Her apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels lived in, not empty, just peaceful. The first thing I noticed was the scent. Something warm and faintly floral, like jasmine tea and old paper. The lights were low, just a single lamp glowing in the corner beside a stack of books. She set her bag down by the couch, her keys making a soft clink on the table. For a moment, she just stood there, breathing in the stillness of her own home. Then she smiled, small, weary, but real. "Sorry about the mess," she said. There was no mess at all. Everything about the place felt deliberate, thoughtful, like her. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with poetry collections and travel journals. A few framed photographs sat on the mantel. Her younger self in a classroom, a trip to the coast, a picture of her with students, some of them probably my classmates. She caught me looking and laughed quietly. "You really do remember everything, don't you?" "Maybe I just notice you more now," I said before thinking. The words came out too honest, but she didn't flinch. Instead, she walked toward the small table near the window, where a worn notebook lay open beside a half-finished cup of tea. "Sit," she said gently, nodding toward the couch. "I don't have much to offer except a few lines of poetry and cold tea." I sat, my hands clasped together, trying to seem calm. But everything, the closeness, The quiet, her voice, made my heart beat faster than it should have. She picked up the notebook and held it out. "You used to love Neruda," she said. "Read me something. It's been a long day." I opened the book. My voice felt uncertain at first, but soon the rhythm of the poem carried me, words about distance, about the way silence can hold two people together. When I finished, she was watching me instead of the page. "You read like you mean it," she said softly. Her eyes didn't move from mine. For a long second, the air between us thickened. Not with tension, but something gentler. A current neither of us wanted to name. She moved closer, just enough that her knee brushed against mine. "Here," she murmured, leaning over to turn the page. Her hand rested lightly on my forearm as she did. The warmth of her touch spread through me like sunlight. Neither of us spoke. The only sound was the quiet ticking of a clock and the faint hum of the city outside. Her fingers stayed there, barely touching, just enough to blur the line between accident and intention. She looked down, almost as if embarrassed by her own impulse, then smiled. "You should have become a writer," she whispered. "Maybe I needed the right editor," I replied, my voice barely above a breath. She laughed softly, a sound both sweet and sad. Then she pulled her hand back, folding it into her lap as if the moment needed to be sealed away. For the rest of the evening we talked, about books, about regrets, about how time moves faster once you stop noticing it. The distance between us never returned to what it was. And even though nothing more was said or done, when I left that night, her voice, quiet, thoughtful, and a little trembled, followed me like a line from a poem I'd never forget. "Be careful," she said. "Some connections don't fade. They just wait for us to admit they're real." Morning light slipped through the blinds, drawing faint gold stripes across her floor. I hadn't realized how long we'd talked until I saw the gray hint of dawn through her curtains. Books lay open on the coffee table, tea gone cold, words half-read but felt all the same. She sat across from me now, elbows resting on her knees, her hair slightly undone from the night before, a few loose strands softening her face. She looked different in the morning, less composed, more real. Neither of us spoke at first. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was necessary. We were both trying to make sense of what had happened, or rather, what hadn't. Every word from last night still hung between us like threads of something fragile. Finally, she spoke. "You should go soon. People talk when they see lights on too late." Her tone was calm, almost practical, but her eyes betrayed her warm, uncertain, and tired in a way that wasn't physical. I nodded slowly, though I didn't move. "Do you regret letting me in?" She shook her head right away. "No. I just need to remember who I am when you're not in the room." That caught me off guard. There was honesty in it. Not cold, not distant, just human. I understood what she meant. For years, she'd been the one with control. The teacher, the professional, the composed adult. And here I was, someone who remembered her before all that armor, someone who somehow slipped past it again. "You don't have to explain," I said. "I do," she whispered, folding her hands together. "Because if I don't, this," she motioned softly between us, "will start to mean something it shouldn't." Her words were careful, but they trembled slightly. It wasn't rejection. It was protection, for both of us. I leaned forward, elbows on my knees, trying to find her eyes. "Maybe meaning isn't the problem," I said quietly. "Maybe pretending there isn't any is." She looked up then, and for a second the air seemed to tighten, fragile but electric. The kind of tension that exists when both people know the truth but are too afraid to speak it aloud. Her lips parted as if to say something, then closed again. Instead, she reached across the small space and fixed my collar, her fingers lingering for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "Still a mess," she murmured, smiling faintly. Her touch was light, barely there, but it grounded me. It said everything her words couldn't. "I feel this too." I caught her hand gently before she could pull away. Not to hold it, just to acknowledge it. Quiet thank you. Then I let go. She drew in a slow breath. "You're kind," she said softly. That's why I have to be careful. I nodded. And that's why I'll listen. The first light of morning caught her face, softening her features into something almost timeless. For a moment, I saw not a teacher or a memory, just a woman, beautiful and uncertain, trying to balance her heart against the world's expectations. When I finally stood to leave, she didn't stop me. She just watched, eyes steady, a faint sadness in her smile, as if she already knew that sometimes, doing the right thing hurts just as much as doing the wrong one. The sky was turning pale when I stepped toward the door. The city outside was still half asleep, its streets silvered with dew and soft morning fog. Inside, her apartment glowed faintly, that calm, amber light that made everything look gentler than it really was. She followed me to the hallway, arms folded loosely as if she wasn't sure what to do with them. The stillness between us was heavy but not suffocating. It was the kind that comes when two people understand something without needing to name it. Neither of us wanted to break it first. "You'll be late," she finally said, her voice quiet, almost careful. I smiled. "I don't mind." That earned a small shake of her head, the kind that hides a smile. She stepped closer, close enough for me to see the faint traces of sleeplessness beneath her eyes, close enough for the warmth of her presence to make me hesitate all over again. "Last night was—" She stopped there, searching for a word that didn't sound wrong. "Nice. Unexpected." I nodded. "It was honest." Something softened in her gaze. She looked down, her thumb brushing the edge of her sleeve. "You always had a way of making simple words feel heavier than they should." I wanted to tell her everything, that she was the reason I learned how to look at the world carefully, the reason I started writing in the first place, that her steadiness, her quiet confidence, had shaped more of me than she'd ever know. But all I said was, "You still have that red journal. Keep it. It belongs here." She smiled then, a little wistful, a little proud. "I think I will." There was a silence again, but this one felt warm, like a shared secret. She reached for the door handle, then paused. "You'll visit again?" "Only if attendance still counts," I said, half teasing. Her laugh came soft, that same laugh that once filled an entire classroom, now quieter, but just as sincere. "It always counts," she murmured, "especially when someone shows up for the right reasons." I took a step toward the doorway, but before I could leave, her hand brushed my sleeve, just a touch, featherlight. It wasn't enough to hold me back, only enough to make me stop. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For reminding me that feeling something doesn't make you foolish. It makes you alive." Her words landed gently, somewhere deep, where gratitude and ache coexist. Outside, the morning air felt sharp but clean. I turned once, and she was still there in the doorway, framed by the soft glow behind her, calm, graceful, and quietly changed. I raised a hand in a small wave. She returned it, and then the door closed, not with finality, but with peace. As I walked down the street, the city waking slowly around me, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe some stories don't need an ending, just the right pause. Because sometimes, love isn't about staying. It's about being remembered. Gently, honestly, and always with warmth. Headphone if this story touched you. Don't forget to subscribe for more slow-burn age-gap romances, where every glance, every silence, and every goodbye has meaning. Speech Balloon, tell me in the comments. Would you have stayed? Or walked away too?